Hello everybody, in this video we are going to be looking at truth tables. If you have not already watched my video on simple and compound statements, I suggest you go watch that first because it introduces the types of statements we're going to be looking at with truth tables today. Our goal for this lesson is to look at constructing truth tables for 6 different types of statements. We have and, or, and not statements, and then we'll also be looking at not and, not or, and exclusive or statements. Compound statements and Boolean statements can get a lot more complex when we're trying to determine whether they're valid or not because there's a lot more outcomes. And so truth tables can give us a way to map out all of the possible outcomes to determine whether it's a valid statement or not. So our first step with a truth table is to set up the truth table. To determine the number of rows and columns, we first need to figure out the number of possible outcomes. And we use that using 2 to the power of n, where n is the number of simple statements that you have. For example, if there's only one simple statement, then you have 2 possible outcomes. You're going to have 2 rows plus, one title row, for example. The number of columns may be different depending on how you're using it to figure out the values. So the number of columns may change from person to person slightly, but you will have the same number of rows. Okay, so again, if it's one simple statement, you're going to have 2 rows and then 1 for the title. If there's 2 simple statements, 2 to the power of 2 is 4. So it's going to look something like this. You're going to have 2 columns for your 2 different simple statements, 4 possible outcomes, and then 1 for the title. And then you'll need to add columns here depending on the operations of what you're trying to figure out, the statement you're trying to figure out. So again, those number of columns you have may be slightly different. Finally, again, if there's 3 simple statements, 2 to the power of 3 is 8. It looks something like this. Again, you'll have 8 rows plus 1 title, and then 1 column per simple statement, plus, however many you need to figure out all the operations. So let's go through an example. You're picking out a shirt and you want it to be medium and red. We're going to construct a truth table for that. Our first simple statement is P equals the shirt is medium. So we want it to be medium. I'm going to set that equal to P. And I'm going to use Q for the shirt is red. Okay, so my start of my truth table is going to be P and Q. Under P, you're going to do true, true, false, false. And under Q, you're going to do true, false, true, false. And what this does is it sets up all of the possible combinations of P and Q. They can both be true. P can be true, but Q can be false. P can be false, but Q can be true, and they can both be false. So by setting it up this exact way with P and Q, you have all of the possible combinations of P and Q being true and false. Okay, so you try. You want a cupcake that is chocolate with cream cheese filling and pink frosting. I want you to construct a truth table for this. First, write out your simple statements, and then construct the truth table. So you can pause the video, start it up again when you're ready. Okay, so you're going to have 3 simple statements here. P is going to be, it is chocolate. Q, it has cream cheese filling. And R, it has pink frosting. So because there's 3, we're going to set it up like this. We have a P, Q, and R column. Under P, we're going to do true, 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 false, 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 false. Under Q, we're going to do true, true, false, false, true, true, false, false. And then under R, you're going to do true, false, true, false, true, false, true, false. And this pattern is going to be the same for every 3 simple statements. So anytime you have 3 simple statements, you're going to set up your truth table exactly like this, because again, it will give you all of the possible combinations of trues and false between 3 simple statements. So now we can apply some operations to these. So let's go through and show you what each of the operations does to a simple statement. So negation is sort of like our not statement, our not operation. And so it changes the truth value of the original statement. So wherever there was a true, you put a false. Wherever there's a false, there's a true. So if I have a not P, and you're just switching whatever was in this column, you're changing it to the opposite. Conjunction is our and operation. And so you want to determine where P and Q are both true. Okay, so when you have a conjunction, we're looking at and true. So P and Q are both true here, but they're not both true anywhere else. So my P and Q column would have a true where there's two trues, and anywhere they're both not true would be false. So in this case, true, false, false, false. Disjunction is our OR. And so you're looking at if P or Q are true, or both, at least one, essentially. So you're saying here, yep, at least one either or are true. This has a true, this has a true. This is the only line. If they're both false, then this is going to be false. Okay, so your disjunction is either or, essentially, or both. If more than one operation is present, then you have to do them in a specific order, just like our order of operations, or you might know it as BEDMAS. You're going to do brackets first, then the not, then and then or. So let's construct a truth table for this statement. So it has a P and a Q, it has nots, and it has our or disjunction symbol in there. So let's break this down. The first thing I'm going to do is ignore all of the operations, and I'm just going to look at how many simple statements I have and start with setting that up. So in here I have a P and a Q. I have two. So I'm going to start by setting up my P and Q columns. And again, those are the same anytime you have P and Q. Anytime you have two simple statements, it's going to look like this. Now I need to do my nots. We're going to do those first. So I'm going to set up a not P column and a not Q column. And remember, not just switches the symbol. Okay, so my not P is going to be false, false, true, true. And my not Q is going to be false, true, false, true. So I've just switched these around. Now that I have these, I'm looking at my operation, which is this OR. So I'm going to look at these two columns, and I'm going to see where they are either or is true, or both. Right? So here, neither are true, so that's false. I have a true, they're both true, so false, true, true, true. So in order to solve this, again, you can break it down into steps. First, just look at how many simple statements there are and set up that part of the table. Then you're going to do your nots, then your ands, then your ors. So in this case, we have our or, and so I'm looking at these two columns and seeing or between these two. And that's my final part of my column, or part of my truth table. Okay, I want you to try this one. Again, look at how many simple statements you have. In this case, because there's brackets here, you're going to do this operation first and then the negation. So pause the video, try it out, and then start it up again when you're ready. Okay, so again, I have a P and a Q, so I'm going to start that part of my truth table. Because there's brackets here, I'm going to do P and Q first. And again, remember that only is true if both are true. Okay. So here is my column for P and Q. They're both true here, but everywhere else is false. And now I'm going to do my negation, my not of this column. So I'm essentially taking this column and switching the sign on all of them. So I get false, true, true, true. Okay, I'm just going to keep upping the level here. Let's try this out. And again, try not to get overwhelmed by the whole statement. Break it down into pieces. Again, our first step is to look at how many simple statements we have. Then you're going to do inside of brackets, negation, and an OR. Okay, so pause the video, try this out, and then start it up again when you're ready. Okay, so I look and I see I have a P and a Q, so let's just start with that. Now I do have some brackets. Inside of the brackets, I have some knots. So let's start with setting up our knot or our negation columns. So I have a knot P and a knot Q. If I look at this first bracket, it's saying P and knot Q. So I'm going to look at this column and I'm going to look at this column. I'm ignoring these two center columns. I'm just looking at this column and this column, and I'm seeing where they are both true. Okay, so not here, yes. In this one, they are not here, not here. So I have a true here, the rest are false. Now I'm going to look at this bracket, and so that tells me to look at this column and see where they are both true. So no, no, yes, no. So there's a yes here, the rest no. And finally, it's telling me to look at this column and see where the OR is, my disjunction. So I'm looking at these two columns, no, yes, yes, no. So false, true, true, false, and that is my end column. So if you break it down into steps and just look at those columns in order to do that operation, it helps you kind of go through the whole thing without being overwhelmed by the whole statement. Okay, try this one. Okay, in this one we have three simple statements, P, Q, and R. So I'm going to set up my P, Q, and R columns. Now I'm looking inside of this bracket and I have a negation. So I'm going to do my not R here. So I flip all of my signs. Then I'm looking at the Q column and the negation R column, and I'm seeing where they are both true. So the and there. So I'm looking at here, and I'm seeing where they're both true. So no, yes, no, 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 yes, no, no. Okay, so there's my column there. And then I can take this column and my P and look at the disjunction there, so the OR. So this column and seeing where either one or both are true. So yes, 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 yes. So these four are obviously because P is. And then in this one, I'm looking at where this has a true. So true, false, false. So true, 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 false, true, false, false. And try this one. Okay, so again, I have three simple statements. I'm going to set up my PQR columns. Now I have brackets here and I have a negation R. So it doesn't really matter whether you do the negation R or P and Q first, as long as you don't do this one. So this is in brackets and the negation R is out here. So I'm going to start with the brackets portion and look at P or Q. So yes, 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 no, no. Then I'm going to look at my negation R here. So I'm just essentially flipping all the signs from R. And then I'm going to look at these two columns and see where they are both true. No, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, no. So this is my final column. So let's look at some more truth tables. we have 3 more operations we need to look at. We have not and, not or, and exclusive or. So our not and symbol looks like this. It has our and symbol with a line over top, almost like our complement that we talked about before. So it's our and symbol with a little line, and that means not and. So essentially is this. It's taking our and negating it. So whatever the and would be, you're doing the opposite of that. So here, if I find the and symbol, yes, no, no, no. The not and would be false, true, true, true. So it's the opposite of your and. Nor is similar. It's the not or, the opposite of or. So it has our or symbol, disjunction symbol, and then a line over top, and it essentially means this, taking our or and negating it. So whatever your or answer would be, you're doing the opposite of that. Sometimes when I'm doing this in a table, I will actually do these 2 columns rather than try and flip it in my head. I like to, sometimes just do the or and then do the nor. And exclusive or, you may see as EOR or XOR, has 2 symbols you may come across. One is the or symbol with a line on the bottom, or this sort of circle with a plus sign in it. Either of those means exclusive or. And that is essentially our or taking out the both. So it's when exactly one is true. So not both is essentially. And this is what it looks like. You're taking P and not Q, or not P and Q, but not both. Essentially, I just do the or and remove where they're both true. So if you look at our what our or would be, we would say true, 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 false, but this one is false, true, 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 because this has both of them in it. So it's when only one of them is true. Okay, not both. So again, we have 6 operations we've looked at all together. Not and or, not and, not or, exclusive or. And so I'm going to go through and do a summary table here for you of what they all would look like with 2 simple statements. So our not P is the opposite of this. Our not Q is the opposite of this. P and Q is where they're both true. P or Q is where either one or both are true. Not and is the opposite of our and. Not or is the opposite of our or. And exclusive or is the same as or, except where they're both true, it's false. So it's when only one or the other is true. So let's put it all together and construct truth tables using any combination of the 6 operations we've looked at. So here is your first one. I want you to pause the video, try it out, and then start it up again when you're ready. Okay, so the first thing I do again is just look at how many simple statements I have. I have P and Q, so I'm just going to start with a P and Q. Then we're going to look inside the brackets. I have this P, not and Q. Okay, so again, I like to do the and first and then do the not and, but that's up to you. And that's why I said some of your columns may look slightly different to get to the and answer, because maybe you don't need to do this. You can just jump right here. But that's okay as long as your final column is the same. So my P and Q looks like this. My P or Q looks like this. And so now I'm set up to solve these 2 brackets. But again, you might not need those 2 columns. That's up to you. So P, not and Q is going to be the opposite of this one. P, not or Q is going to be the opposite of this one. And then I'm looking at these 2 columns and seeing or. And so I get no, yes, yes, yes. Okay, here's another one. Pause the video, try it out, start it up again when you're ready. Okay, so again, I have P's and Q's. I'm going to start with that. I have a not or and an or. So I'm going to start with an or column here to set me up. So I have this or and then my not or here. And together I'm looking at and. No, 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 no. None of these have both of these are true. Just a note, a statement who has all false here is called a contradiction. And we denote that as P equals C. We use a C for contradiction. So these two actually contradict each other and it's never true. So because it's all falses here, we say it's a contradiction. Okay. Try this one out. Okay, so again, we have P's and Q's. We have some not ors, not ands. So I'm going to set up an and an or column here. Then I can find my not ands and not ors. I also have a negation of this bracket here. And so I'm going to find that as well. So I have negation of P not or Q. And so now I am looking at my not P not or Q and my P not and Q, so these two columns, and I'm seeing the or. Okay, so let me break that down again. I see I have these not and not or, so I'm going to set up these columns first. Then I found my not or, and I negated it because I have a negation here on this bracket. Okay. Then I found my not and now I have this whole part and this whole part, so I can find my or of these two. And here you end up with actually all truths. A statement who has all truths is called a tautology, and we denote that as P equals T. Okay, a lowercase t here is a tautology, so they're all true. Okay, so how did you do? I want you to think over how you've done over this video. For my Niagara College students, if you are a sad face here, meaning you're really lost and you're reaching out to me or looking at an additional resources tab to find some more resources to understand this content. If you're a thoughtful face, you're looking at the exercises that are attached to this video or this week. And if you're a happy face, I still suggest doing a few just to make sure you stick it in your brain and then you're good to go on.